Hello and welcome back. Thank you for joining me here again today as we're going to step through a very quick demo of how you can leverage tools such as Jenkins and Git and Rackspace Private Cloud to be able to set up your very own CI/CD integration. And again, just keep in mind, this is going to be a very simple test just to kind of show the power and strength behind putting all those tools together and what can easily be accomplished. So to start here, we're going to start out by just looking at a very simple PHP API that I created. It's out here on GitHub. There's nothing specifically special about it, outside the fact that there is an API PHP file which contains the data that will be returned. And next in line with that is a wrapper file that's called REST client PHP, which basically will just display the results from that API PHP file. And then, of course, as we reviewed in the blog post already, that there is a script folder here that has the actual scripts that Jenkins will leverage and use when you actually execute a build for this specific application. And again, just taking a very quick look at the two scripts that are here. There's a deploy script. This script will actually deploy the code on the instance that we have running when an update occurs to the code in GitHub. And then the second script here is titled just as what it's supposed to do, which is supposed to be a test script. So after we run the build and it actually deploys the code, this script is immediately executed to test to make sure that the API is available, via making sure that your build was successful and that you didn't end up breaking something. So now that we've taken a second and kind of reviewed the very simple API that we've created here out of PHP, we'll jump over and look at our OpenStack environment. So what we have running here, we've logged into the Horizon dashboard of our Rackspace Private Cloud that's powered by OpenStack. And what I did is I created a project called DevCom to kind of simulate a development environment, particularly maybe specifically working for a commercial organization. And in here, I have two instances that are running. And again, this is more as a very static example of what you can do here. The first instance is the Jenkins instance. So this is the instance that actually runs Jenkins. And we'll actually look at the Jenkins dashboard in 1 second here. And then the second instance is the instance where we're going to actually deploy our application to. Again, we're using this as a very static environment just so that we can demo this as an example. In a normal situation, you would actually have Jenkins spin up an instance and then have the code deployed to the instance that Jenkins spins up. So in a much more dynamic fashion. But again, in this example, we're going with more of a static approach. Next, we'll jump over and take a look at our Jenkins dashboard. So this is the dashboard for Jenkins. And if you're logging in, you would come in at this level here. You can see that we already have our project created, the My API project created here in Jenkins. And if we click on the project here in the dashboard, it's some very quick things that you'll be able to notice. You can go in and see the status of it. You can make changes to this project in relation to the Jenkins project that we have created here. And as well as you can see the build histories that are available there. You can see that some builds at the very beginning didn't go very well for me. And then the most important, two most important last pieces to cover is you can make configuration changes to your project right here. And last but not least, you can actually execute a manual build of your project by clicking this link here. For our example today, we are going to actually end up doing more of a manual build due to the fact that the instance that we have Jenkins running on is not public facing. So you're not able to access it from outside of the VPN connection I have. And because of that, GitHub won't be able to actually trigger the plugin that we have configured already that's going to call that Jenkins to actually execute the build. And one thing we didn't cover really quickly is that plugin we have enabled on GitHub. So if we go into settings of your within your GitHub repo, you'll see that on the left, there is actually something called integration and services. And if you click on that, you'll see very quickly here that we've already configured that Jenkins service in our GitHub repository to be able to make a call whenever an action is performed within the GitHub repo, specifically whenever a new content is committed or new code is committed. It will then execute this service plugin, which in turn is intended to call my Jenkins server, which is intended to actually execute a build. So again, because my Jenkins instance is not externally exposed to the internet, we're going to actually manually execute a build. But to show this power in a little bit more depth, so let's take a second and actually look at how a change could actually be executed. So right here on this tab, we actually have that API that's running on the instance that we have configured in our Rackspace private cloud built on OpenStack. And it's very simple application. It shows some of the OpenStack release names. And if you click on it, it'll actually give you some more details in relation to the RPC version and of course the price, which is free. So this is it in its current state. And let's say, for example, we wanted to update it and add the Mataka release, the Newton release, and maybe the Octavia release to this list of services that are going to be returned by the API. So we can do something really simple by popping into that file that I have listed here, and by adding those additional releases here or services here, we can just edit this file really quickly. And I'm going to use some magic edit here. As you can see, I've already had this stuff prepped on the side so that it can make this a nice easy demo. As well as I'm going to make the update down here in the array of IDs that we have available for the releases. So since we've added 3 more, I have to up the number by 3 more and make sure I associate a name with that there. So now that we've made those changes, if we save those changes, what you immediately will notice, because I choose to run GitHub Desktop, is that GitHub Desktop has already picked up on the fact that I've made changes to that PHP file, and we can see the changes are highlighted in green here, and as well as it shows the difference between what was changed and what was there before. So because we've made these changes, we're now ready to commit. So if we commit this code, so we put in a note, ready to go, and we hit commit, what GitHub Desktop does, which is the same thing you can do from the command line, is basically execute a commit so that that code is committed to our GitHub repository. And before we pop over to see what Jenkins will do with it, if we go back into our repository and we go in and look at that API PHP file, we'll notice that now those additional releases have been added to that file. So this code is considered to be committed. And in normal circumstances, what it would have did is it would have triggered Jenkins to kick off a build. But again, because the Jenkins server is not accessible externally, we didn't associate a floating IP to it or a provider network, we have to actually kick it off manually. So let's kick that off manually by going back into our Jenkins desktop. We're already in our project, and we're going to click on the Build Now button. So as we click on that Build Now button, we're going to see down here that it's actually doing some stuff, which is a good thing. And if we click on that build, we'll be able to see the console output of it. And by clicking on console output there, we'll really quickly see that the changes of the Git were actually processed by Jenkins, as well as you can see the connection that occurred. You can see the fact that it did its Git pull down here, that it was a change to the API.php file, and then last but not least, the execution of that test file shows that our API is up and that the build was successful. So now if we pop over to our API again and we hit a refresh of our browser, we should now see those additional services listed there, and voila, magic has happened, and those initial services are now showing up there, and if I click on it, it now shows our additional data. So again, this was meant to be a really quick example of what you can do with tools like Rackspace Private Cloud built on OpenStack, Jenkins, and GitHub. Hopefully this was useful, and I hope to talk to you guys soon.